Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, May the 22nd. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Maryland Department of Health's Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the DDA Self-Directed Services Waiver Renewal Updates webinar. On the panel today, we have Christy Colbreth, Statewide Coordinator of Self-Directed Services. We also have the DDA team available for questions later on. And before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar, by computer and phone. And if you look at the panel interface on your right, labeled audio, you can click either computer or phone to switch for the best option. We will be recording the webinar and posting the session on YouTube and the DDA website. Today's PowerPoint has also been uploaded as an attachment and is available for you to download in the webinar panel box. We also have two additional spreadsheets available to download. If you're listening by phone, you can request that these handouts be emailed. Questions can be typed in the question or chat box in the webinar panel, and we will get to those towards the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Christy Colbreth. Good afternoon, Christy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Donna, we can go to the next slide. As Donna mentioned, my name is Christy Colbreth. I am the DDA Statewide Coordinator of Self-Directed Services. We are really happy to be with you all today, and I'm so happy to see so many people on the call. Donna, I can't see our slide. There we go. Excellent. Today we're going to review several updates to self-directed services. The first thing we'll do is we'll give a quick transition reminder regarding Public Partnerships LLC. Then we'll have an update on the reasonable and customary rates and wages for 2023. Then we will review the newly updated self-directed services budget sheet and share the new budget modification process. We will then review the updates to both individual and family-directed goods and services and support broker services. And finally, we'll have time for questions. During our question and answer time, we will be going through the questions submitted regarding self-direction on Friday's webinar first, and then we'll take additional questions from today. So if you submitted a question on Friday, we will answer it before we get to those that you've asked today. Thank you. Next slide. Just a quick reminder, Public Partnership LLC, or PPL's contract with the Department of Health ends very soon. If you or someone you support uses PPL as their FMCS, we really need everyone to choose a new FMCS by 5 p.m. tomorrow, May 23rd. Any team member can complete the PPL transition choice form, and that link is available in our slides. If someone is unable to make that choice, we will be randomly assigning a new FMCS to that person after 5 p.m. tomorrow. Next slide. The Self-Directed Services Act of 2022 created flexibility in self-direction. The support broker role was expanded, and we'll discuss those updates today. And individual and family-directed goods and services, or IFDGS, was broadened, and we'll also be reviewing those updates today. The waivers were renewed to include these updates. Reasonable and customary wages and rates are being updated with state-approved cost of living adjustments. DDA also took the opportunity to update the self-directed services tools to make self-direction easier. We'll review those enhancements on the webinar today as well. Next slide. In regards to the reasonable and customary rates and wages, the DDA is finaling those wages and rates, and they will be shared before July 1st, 2023. Next slide. Now, let's review updates to the Self-Directed Services budget sheet. This is the same budget sheet that everyone is familiar with in self-direction, but with many new features. Next slide. the first new feature we have to share are the addition of training wages. You can now budget for staff training. For each service, you would list the number of staff, the rate per hour, and the training hours needed. Then the training wages and taxes are calculated automatically. In this example, this person has 2 employees. They want to include $50 per employee for the training costs. So that would be for the cost of a CPR class. They also want each staff to be paid for 20 hours of training time during the year. And they've broken that down for one employee who makes $22 an hour and another employee who makes $25. Next slide. The next update to our budget sheet is the holiday pay differential. You can now budget holiday pay for staff. So this would be pay that an employee makes when they work on a special holiday that you've assigned. To calculate holiday pay, you would multiply the number of holiday days you would like during the year times the number of hours of each holiday and times the holiday rate you want to pay per hour. In this example, it calculates 6 total paid holidays multiplied by 8 hours per day times $30 per hour of holiday pay, which equals $1,440. Next slide. The next update to our self-directed services budget sheet are benefits notes. You can now add notes for your team and FMCS to understand the benefits you've budgeted. And you have 2 examples of how this might look. So on the left, you can see that this person wants to be clear with their team and their FMCS that health benefits are for employees who work 40 hours or more per week, that PTO is for employees working 40 hours per week, and they have 2 weeks each year, and that holiday pay is $2 more per their regular rate. But on the right, you see that this person has chosen to write benefits policies and has noted to their team and FMCS that they would need to review those policies to understand how those benefits are being used. Next slide. The next update to our budget sheet is the addition of a day-to-day administrator. Beginning on July 1st, 2023, individual and family directed goods and services can be used to hire a day-to-day administrator. The funding for this person would be from cost savings or unallocated funds. They may be a vendor or an employee. And we will have additional guidance coming soon in regards to the day-to-day administrator and other goods and services. And we'll have a webinar on June 21st, 2023 to review that. And we'll have a save the date slide at the end so you can write those dates down. Next slide. The next update to our budget sheet is an update from our waivers. The limits have been increased per the waiver renewals. So environmental modifications are now $50,000 every 3 years, and vehicle modifications are at $15,000 within a 10-year period. Next slide. Please remember that the self-directed budget process is a team process. Once it's completed, the budget sheet should be submitted to the FMCS to review to make sure it meets our program standards. That budget sheet is now available online and anyone can use it starting today, but it will be required for anyone planning after July 1st, 2023. That budget sheet is also available in our handout section today. Next slide. Now let's review the budget modification process. This is the same process that many might be familiar with, while using the COVID Form 5 form, but the form has been updated and streamlined with some pretty great enhancements. Next slide. Budget lines can be reduced by listing them in the services being reduced or taken from an allocated funds box. Up to 7 lines can be reduced in one modification. This example shows $1,000 being reduced from personal supports, paid time off, and $1,000 being taken from unallocated funds. Next slide. Service line items can be increased by listing them in the services being increased box. Up to 7 lines can be increased in one modification. This example with the previous slide shows that $2,000 are being increased into individual and family directed goods and services. Next slide. For your support, we've added a box that automatically shows when your increasing and decreasing totals match, then the box turns green, and when the increasing and decreasing totals don't match, the box turns red. Next slide. The person self-directing or their legal guardian or designated representative always approves the modification with a signature. The Coordinator of Community Services, or CCS, also attests that the person approved the request. Modifications are sent to the FMCS agency to apply to the person's budget. Next slide. I'm very excited about this part of our modification form. We've included optional calculation tools for teams to use that help people decide exactly how much money they need to move from line items. We will have a walkthrough of this budget form and modification form that will be coming soon. It will be a pre-recorded walkthrough that's available on June 1st, 2023. Next slide. Now, let's review the updates to individual and family directed goods and services. After all assessed needs are met, cost savings can be used to purchase individual and family directed goods and services. Beginning on July 1st, 2023, there is no longer a cap on how much funding can be used in individual and family directed goods and services. Next slide. For IFDGS, it is required that the good or service relates to a need or goal in the person-centered plan, that it decreases the need for Medicaid services, that it supports the person to maintain or increase independence, and that it promotes opportunities for the person to live in, be integrated in, and included in the communities of their choosing. The good or service cannot be provided through another funding source, and all support needs listed in the PCP must be met. Next slide. New items and activities include, these are new to our new waiver renewal, activities that promote fitness, fees for programs and activities that promote socialization and independence, small kitchen appliances that promote independent meal preparation, laundry appliances to promote independence and self-care, sensory items related to the person's disability, certain safety equipment, personal electronic devices to meet and assess health, communication, or behavior need, and internet services. Next slide. Additionally, now people can include a day-to-day administrator in their individual and family directed goods and services. Just like all other goods and services, the day-to-day administrator is funded through the cost savings. Day-to-day administrators can provide assistance with all aspects of household and personal management essential to maintaining community living, including support with scheduling and maintaining appointments and money management. Teams should add the day-to-day administrator to the budget through the annual or revised planning process. And additional guidance will be coming soon, and we'll review that guidance on our June 21st webinar. Next slide. There will now be a way to easily request a good or service using your cost savings. The person self-directing their services and their team can request a good or service using the online request form. For now, each request must be submitted individually. Next slide. The form requires the person's name, their date of birth, the regional office, and their FMCS agency. The form is automatically sent to the person, their CCS, their FMCS, and the DDA regional office, and any other person desired. Next slide. It is best practice to request individual and family directed goods and services as a team together, but any person in the team can complete the request. Next slide. In the form, the person submitting the request would include what good or service is being requested and describe that good or service and why it's needed. Here in this example, we see that the person is requesting a YMCA membership, and they list that having a YMCA membership would allow them to help them play basketball with their friends, take yoga classes, and to go swimming. They've also included the cost of the service, and here they've listed it as $500. Any individual purchase of $5,000 or more must be reviewed by the DDA regional office. Next slide. When you're submitting the form, you review your request to make sure it meets all of the requirements of individual and family directed goods and services by checking the box to show that they meet each requirement. And then the person submitting would electronically sign to show that you've made an informed decision. Next slide. By adding email addresses, you can send this form to any member of the team. Your coordinator of community service must always receive a copy, and the FMCS and regional office that you list in your form will automatically receive a copy. Next slide. The approval and processing process. So for any request under $5,000, it will automatically be sent to the FMCS to process, and anything over $5,000, the DDA regional office will review within 20 days. Next slide. Now, let's review the expanded role of the support broker. At the direction of the person self-directing, support broker services may assist the person to define goals, needs, and preferences, make informed decisions in arranging, directing, and managing their services, in the development of emergency backup plans, in identifying, assessing, and managing supports, services, and resources, in independent advocacy to assist in filing grievances and complaints, and to just understand the rules and responsibilities involved with self-direction. Next slide. There have also been updates to the number of hours a support broker can work. Funding for support broker hours may be authorized in the detailed service authorization in LTSS Maryland for a maximum of 15 hours for initial orientation and assistance, what we have called support broker startup, and 4 hours per month for information coaching and mentoring, what we have called ongoing support broker services. Any unused ongoing support broker hours are considered cost savings and can be used at any time during the plan year. and up to 30 hours per month may be budgeted and used with cost savings or unallocated funds to pay a support broker. Next slide. Support broker services will now be required for some people. A support broker is required when a person hires a family member, a legally responsible person, a representative payee, and a guardian. The support broker provides oversight and quality assurance and works to reduce conflicts of interest. We will have additional guidance and a webinar to come on July 19th, 2023. Next slide. This is the slide I promised so that we all can mark our calendars for some important dates in self-direction. We'll have the walkthrough videos of both how to use the budget sheet and the new budget modification process available on June 1st. We'll have an individual and family directed goods and service guidance available and a webinar on June 21st, 2023. And then we will have support broker guidance and a webinar on July 19th, 2023. Next slide. We are here to support you. In each of our regional offices, we have a really great self-directed services lead who can answer any of your questions by just a quick email, and their emails are included there on our slide. Next slide. And if you have any specific questions for me, you can contact Nick Burton, our Director of Programs, or myself, Christy Culbreth, the statewide coordinator of self-direction. Next slide. Now I'll turn it over to Nick to begin our question and answer portion.
Thanks, Christy. So like Christy said at the beginning, there were some questions submitted during the last webinar that I wanted for us to review first, and then we will get to the questions from today's webinar. There might be some overlap, so we will try to account for that. All right, Christy, you ready for the first question from last week?
Let's go.
All right, so the first question, will individual family-directed goods and services be added as a service in the PCP service authorization?
That's a good question. No. Individual and family goods and services are identified in the person's budget, except for the $500 for recruitment. So everything but that 500 would be paid out of cost savings or unallocated funds.
Great, thank you. Christy, how is camp different from travel adventures?
DDA funds respite that provides opportunities for people to learn new skills, to increase their independence, and to develop relationships, as well as to provide a break for primary caregivers. I would encourage the team to further discuss the details of what they might be requesting to make sure their request meets the definition of respite.
Awesome, thanks. All right, next question. Can quarterly meetings for self-directed participants be held virtually by phone like the annual PCP?
Quarterly monitoring is required to be in person.
Right. And I'll just add to that that any person can choose to have a PCP meeting either in person, virtually. It's their meeting. They can choose how they want to have that meeting. It does not need to be in person. What does need to be in person is the CCS's required quarterly monitoring. Okay, Christy, will self-directed participants have access to LTSS?
So self-directed participants and anyone receiving services will have access to My LTSS, which is a version of what is available on LTSS.
And they'll be able to see their plan in there?
Exactly, yes.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. This one was a very specific question, but I'm sure there are other people that have similar type questions. Are classes in Montgomery College's Challenge program covered under individually family directed goods and services?
We would need more information on the specific program to be able to understand exactly what the request is, but it's important to keep in mind that tuition is not covered under individual and family directed goods and services.
Great, thanks. So for budget mods, are we still using the DDA COVID form number 5 come July 1st?
That's a great question. No, we have the updated budget modification form that can be used right now, and then beginning July 1st, it will be the required form to use.
Awesome. Is the budget sheet going to be updated or modified?
It is. It's available today on our webinar as a handout. It will be available online for anyone to use.
Awesome. So Christy, personal supports is noted as limited to 82 hours for traditional services. Does that mean individuals in self-direction can go above 82 hours?
Anyone can go over 82 hours of personal supports if they have the assessed need for it.
Perfect. Hey, so the last week we were talking about the minimum hours per day for meaningful day services. Does that apply to people in self-direction?
It does not. That is based on provider billing in PCIS versus LTSS Maryland, and everyone who self-directs their services is inside LTSS Maryland.
Great. Can a rep payee be a person support broker?
Yes, but if a relative or a representative payee is the person's support broker, no other family member may work for the person.
All right. Let's see here. Under self-direction, what is the difference between one-on-one and individual DSP supporting a participant?
Assessed need for one-to-one funding would be shared in the person-centered plan and approved at a different rate. So if you review our reasonable and customary rates, they're different for one-to-one versus a group rate. If someone has not been authorized for the one-to-one service, they may be authorized for a group rate. So that would be the difference in both traditional and self-direction. And then the difference would be that people who self-direct their services have the employer authority to choose the rate they pay those employees based on our reasonable and customary rates.
Great. So this question came up a bunch today, and it came up in the last webinar. For individually family directed goods and services, is the limit of $5,000 for all items or per item?
So we don't have a limit of $5,000. There is no limit to individual and family directed goods and services. But if a request per one item is $5,000 or over, the DDA regional office must review that request.
Great. For transportation and self-direction, will they change reimbursing the individual, since if they have transportation in their budget, they are usually not with staff when they're using it?
We cannot directly reimburse people who are receiving services, but other team members and family members may be reimbursed for the service, or the FMCS agency may purchase the services directly.
Okay. For families that are now required to have a support broker, is there guidelines on what that looks like? And can a family hire a support broker but not use them?
That is a really great question, and I'm excited to go into further detail on this on our webinar on June 21st.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah. All right, I think I'm almost ready to move to the questions from today. All right, will the staff doing day-to-day supports through individually family-directed goods and services be required to clock in and out in real time? Can that service overlap with another service with the participant?
That's a good question. So we'll go into more detail on this in our June 21st webinar, but the day-to-day admin would be required to clock in and out if they are listed as an employee, or they would submit an invoice if they're listed as a vendor. But just like the support broker, the day-to-day admin would be listed as providing non-direct support to a person. So the clock-ins and clock-outs could overlap with direct support people.
Great. So since time submissions are mandated to be submitted electronically, can assistive technology be taken into account for a person as part of their employer authority responsibilities?
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Absolutely. I just want to reiterate that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
If you need assistive technology to support with you being more independent to be an employer, absolutely talk to your team about making sure that's included in your plan. So Christy, internet, it's a needed thing in this day and age. Does a hotspot count as internet?
It does. And we'll have additional details on our reasonable and customary sort of guidelines when we issue our guidance on goods and services.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go to our questions today. This one actually, Christy, I'm going to give you a second to get a drink of water and take a breath.
Okay.
And I'm going to give this to Robert. So Robert, is a third FMCS option going to be added?
Hello, thanks everyone, and good afternoon. That's a great question, and the answer to that question is yes. We will be adding a third FMCS vendor, and we will be starting the process to procure that vendor shortly.
Great, thank you. Okay, Christy, I think you're back up.
Great.
The first question for you is, and I believe this is under the budget form you showed, what is included under training beyond CPR, first aid, and CMT?
That's a great question. Last summer, we updated our self-directed budget sheet instructions that did list that if a person can require any training that makes sense for them as the employer, and they could pay for that under the training. So I'm not sure I have the best answer other than people can require training that they need.
So it's pretty flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. How do you list 30 hours per month of support broker services on the budget?
That's great. So on our budget sheet, there is a listing for number of hours per month and the rate per month that the support broker charges. And you would list 30, up to 30 hours right there in that budget sheet.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the benefit notes, the new section that got added, is it required to put notes?
They're definitely not required. We heard from some people that they really would like that option to be able to add that for their team and their FMCS to know. So they're not required, but we encourage it as best practice.
Great. And Rhonda, are you on with us right now? I think we have a vehicle mod question.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So the question is, vehicle modifications have always been $15,000 every 10 years. Is there no change there?
What a great question. We have not made a change related to the limit for vehicle modifications. If that's something that stakeholders are interested, we can take that back as a public input and look at that for a future amendment.
Thanks, Rhonda. All right, Christy, back on. Christy, where is the budget sheet to be uploaded or submitted to the FMCS?
That's a great question. So each FMCS would have a different submission process. So I would reach out to the folks in your FMCS to ask them if they would like that budget sheet emailed or uploaded into their portal. It's also important to note that the CCS would upload the budget sheet that's completed into FMCS client attachments so that the FMCS would automatically have it in LTSS Maryland too.
Great. All right, Christy, this one, I think part of it is an FMCS related question, and I think some things that are being worked on, but the other is related to the budget mod. So I'm going to ask it to you. If a FMCS is not breaking out the items within a budget category like PTO, holiday pay, but we know that the participant has spent more than originally allocated, should we still do a budget modification if the report is not specifically showing a deficit in that category?
That's a great question. And just like Nick mentioned, I know that the FMCSs are working on enhanced details in their budget sheets or in their budget reports. But I would say, yes, if you know that there would be a deficit in a line item, do a modification for it. I think that's a great thing the team could be doing.
Great. Christy, is the budget mod checklist still required to accompany the budget mod form?
It is not. That is a great question. The budget modification checklists existed so that there would be some checks and balances in the team in regards to unallocated funds. But that form is no longer required because of the access that the FMCS in particular has to LTSS Maryland now. So no, it's not required.
No more checklists. That's exciting. Christy, what is the maximum amount of money that can be moved in a budget modification?
There is no limit on how much funding can be moved at one time in a modification.
Great. Aside from what was authorized based on assessed need?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. You can't move money that isn't in your budget. But,
all right, great. So this one's, I think, a question, and you might have to help clarify here. So for the budget mod, why was the CCS added back into the approval process? Won't that whole thing's getting processed?
I'd hope not. We have included this as a check just to ensure that people are have made an informed decision. So making changes to the budget. Yeah, we want to make sure people are making informed decision. We believe it is best practice in all scenarios for the entire team to meet together to do budget modifications. But know that might not be the case all the time.
And Christy, that's different than the DDA reviewing that, right?
That's correct.
Right. So the CCS as a part of the team works with the other parts of the team to just take a look at that budget, make sure that the person has the information they need in collaboration with their other team to be able to move that forward. Great. So another question on promoting fitness. So would that include personal fitness training for individually family directed goods and services?
I believe that answer is yes, but I'll confirm with Rhonda that it does, right, Rhonda?
I'm sorry, can you give me the question again and I'll look it up?
Yep, we'll go ahead and look this one up. But does personal training fit into promoting fitness?
Okay, I will confirm with the waiver.
All right, we'll confirm and we'll come back to that. Just ping when you're ready, Rhonda. All right, and maybe we'll also look this one up around zoo memberships, museum memberships, just to make sure we're clear on that one too, okay? And then Christy, these will also be reviewed in more detail at the webinar that you're doing on individually family directed goods and services, correct?
That's right.
Great. All right. Christy, what's the difference between adaptive technology and small kitchen appliances?
That's a great question. I think we would want to hear from the team if they have a good or service or technology in mind that they would want to purchase to sort of review to see what meets in which category that would be in. But when we're thinking about small kitchen appliances, those would be things that are not adaptive to someone's disability, that are kitchen appliances that can be used just to support independent meal planning and creating.
Well, and Christy, I've said it before and I'll say it again, those air fryers are a game changer, particularly for people who want to be more independent with cooking.
That's right.
There you go.
Oh.
Okay. So, Christy, we had already talked about the budget modifications and the regional office isn't reviewing them. Is that correct?
We did. So just keep in mind that budget modifications would not be going to the DDA to review unless the FMCS denied the request for some reason. But for the most part, budget modification forms would be sent directly to the FMCS, and they would be reviewed for program standards.
Okay. Christy, is the individually family directed goods and services form part of the PCP initial or annual plan PCP, or is it something that can be used throughout the year?
That's a great question. It can be both. So someone might be planning for goods and services during their planning year, and then they probably would include that in their budget sheet. So there's a individual and family directed goods and service section in our budget sheet still that people can use. So if that's the case, when they're completing the form, the form actually asks, did you include this in your annual planning? And if you did, then you don't have to explain where you're getting the funding from because you've budgeted for it. But it also can be used at any time during the year. We want people to assess what they need throughout the year and look at their cost savings and make decisions throughout the year. So they can request it at the beginning or during the year.
Okay. Is this form replacing the contracts previously requested by DDA to be attached in additional documents on self-directed plans?
I'm not sure what form that is.
Do you want us to reach out to get some more information from that person?
We can, but there would be no additional documents in the PCP. You would complete this form instead. So, yes.
Okay. Rhonda, looks like you've got some information for us on the previous question.
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say about individual and family directed goods and services. Christy shared a slide that had some of kind of the standards and parameters around it. So every request is going to be different, and so you want to look at that and use that person-centered planning process. The waiver does note that activities that promote fitness, such as fitness membership, personal training, aquatics, and horseback riding, would be included under goods and services. And then related to the question about zoo and other memberships, the waiver also notes fees for programs and activities that promote socialization and independence, such as art, music, dance, sports, or other, according to the participant's individual interests. So again, I would use that person-centered planning process, look at the guidance. I know Christy's going to be sharing more, but you can kind of work through that to see really what would be, services, goods, and supports that could support the person based on the parameters of this expanded service.
Great, thanks, Rhonda. So to me, it sounds like there's some flexibility there and that teams are going to have to really have some conversations about the need and what's going to benefit the person in becoming more independent, meaning developing new relationships, increasing their skills, and that if there's questions, certainly reach out to the SDS leads, your CCS and or DDA, and we can support you with kind of navigating some of those questions. And again, remember, Christy is going to be working on developing some guidance. So we're going to take all these questions into consideration on that guidance, and we'll make sure those are available to everyone. And then we'll also be doing a webinar on that as well. All right, Christy, Can a support broker be a day-to-day administrator?
That's a great question, and one that I would like to consider as we finish and finalize our guidance.
All right, so we'll dig that back and look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Let's see here. Go to the next question. You talked a little bit about the individually family directed goods and services form. Do they have to also enter that on the budget anymore if they're using the individually family directed goods and services form?
It doesn't have to be included in the budget, but it can be included in the budget sheet at the beginning of the year. But what's important, the most important part of the request form is listing the type of service that you're requesting and the sort of an explanation of what that service is so that we can keep track of that.
Great.
Mhm.
And then there talks about here about what's the justification needed for more than 4 hours for support broker. And I was going to go ahead and try to answer this one. Christy, is that okay?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be individually driven. I think teams need to have a conversation about what the need is, what that looks like for the person. It's really going to be based upon the individual. And so it would be really difficult to answer that question here in terms of thinking about all nearly 3,000 people self-directing their supports. So I think that's going to be an individual thing. There will be some things that you can think about as we issue some support broker guidance for the team to consider. But by no means are we going to be able to account for every single situation. Chrissy, did you want to add anything to that?
I will say that many folks, I think, will really be able to quickly utilize the up to 30 hours from cost savings because of that fully loaded brick that exists from the approval of specific services, and within that rate can include some of the things that support brokers have historically done for people.
Great. Rhonda, I'm gonna pass this one to you. Should staff that are onboarding for TYs with a 7/1 start date obtain in-person CPR first aid, or is virtual still an option for them?
What a great question. I think given that they are starting services in July, you should be looking at in-person supports. Nick open to further explore, but that flexibility ends June 30th, and they would begin providing services July 1st.
Okay. All right, let's see. So, Christy, this one we may need to get back to folks on in our guidance, but I'm going to share with you right now. With changes and requirements for support broker for some individuals, can you share the process for the service to be added to the person's plan before 7/1 if they don't already have it? Can they do a plan revision and have it be effective 7/1?
Absolutely, they
Great.
could do that.
Christy, what are the times on the webinars, or do we just have a save the date now and we'll send out a invite in the newsletter next week?
That is correct. In the DDA connection next Thursday, there will be links with times and dates. But save those dates, and we'll get you some times next week.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we answered that question. Oh, actually, this one we did not. For the online form, for the individually family directed goods and services form, is that submitted before or after the IFDGS service has been paid for?
It would be submitted before it is paid for. In order for the FMCS to pay it, they should have this form.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another person asked a question is, how are we going to evaluate what quality assurance means from a support broker perspective? And my guess is you're going to go into a little bit more detail on that in your guidance and on the webinar.
That's right. The webinar on July 19th.
Okay.
I might have that date wrong.
And when does DDA have to look at the individually family-directed goods and services budget?
If an individual request is for $5,000 or more, the DDA would be alerted of the form. So the DDA wouldn't need to review the budget sheet for that goods and service because that form would be completed and it would automatically go to the regional office if a request for one purchase is $5,000 or more.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great. And just to clarify, the new budget tool that was created, it's pretty cool, pretty slick. Is that required for use July 1?
It is. So it is available now. It can be used now for people who are planning right this second, but it will be required for anyone planning after July 1st.
Okay.
Mhm.
Not sure what that question's asking. We'll need to follow up. Let's see. We answered that. In regards to, I'm going to answer this question, Christy. It's a question about what if a person doesn't want to complete monitoring in person? So it is a requirement for the CCS to complete monitoring in person. The team can certainly have a conversation about what that looks like. Again, we've said in many other webinars, it doesn't have to be a meeting around the table where everyone sits and talks and looks at each other. It could be at a community setting. It could be at the park. It could be at the front yard. It could be in a variety of different settings. But for health and safety requirements and for the requirements of the CCS as part of their role, they are required to do a quarterly monitoring in person with the person. If there's further questions about that, I would encourage you to talk to the regional office and the regional director, and certainly I can help in those conversations as well, but it is required. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to ask Rhonda this question. Rhonda, there's some questions in here on My LTSS. When will individuals have more information about what they can see, how to access it, what it looks like, what they can do with it?
Yeah, great question. We shared a little bit of this information on Friday, but let me share it again. We are working to develop some informational tools on how to access, log in, and use My LTSS. We are also seeking some individuals that would be interested in piloting the use of My LTSS so that we can make sure that everything works for people and that the information and tools we share, like brochures or information on how to access it, is going to be informative and useful for people. We're looking to provide a webinar probably early summer and provide information so people can access their My LTSS. The initial functionality or access and things you can do with My LTSS will include being able to see your person-centered plan as it is viewed in LTSS. People will also be able to invite others to also be able to see that information. They would be giving permission for the CCS to, they'll be given the opportunity to invite people right in the system. And then in the future, we're looking at making additional updates to the My LTSS system. And one of the things that we're really excited about would be people having the ability to review and approve their person-centered plan right in My LTSS in real time. So more things will be coming as we look to enhance that. But the first part will be being able to access and see your person-centered plan and the status of that, and being able to invite other people, such as your family members, other team members, support broker and such, to be able to view that too.
Awesome. Thanks, Rhonda. It's going to be pretty cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and answer this question. So the question is there a minimum hours requirement for all meaningful day services for people in self-direction. No, the minimum hours requirement for meaningful day services are specific to providers who are billing in PCIS2. The next question I'll go ahead and take as well. Who assesses the need for personal support over 82 hours? The team does. The team needs to have a conversation about what the need is and make sure that the need is clearly documented in the PCP. What does it look like? What is going to be happening over 82 hours? What are the supports that are going to be provided? It might be documented in the home section of the PCP. It might be documented in the community section, depending on where those additional hours are needed. It might be support around a behavior support or a health and safety support. And so it might be also documented in the risk section of the PCP. But the team needs to really have a conversation about that. And then that request will be submitted to DDA for review and consideration. All right, let's see. We answered that. Let's see, that's not related to this. Let's see, just getting through the questions. Let's see. All right, can a laptop or tablet be purchased through self-direction? So I would just say that, you know, assistive technology is a service through our waiver, and the team needs to have a conversation about what the best tool to meet the person's need would be. So I would talk to the team about what's going to be the best technology to meet a person's need. Okay, that question we answered already about when to use the IFDGS form versus the budget modification. So this question comes up a lot, Rhonda, and I think I'm gonna pass it over to you. So Rhonda, are overnight supports the same as personal supports?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have in our under personal supports the ability for people to use personal supports overnight. And so we're calling them overnight supports. So there is the ability for people who need those overnight supports to seek and request those in their person-centered plan. The waiver renewal, we did include language to support personal supports, overnight supports. It could be documented in a behavior support plan. It could be noted in a nursing care plan, but it could also be noted in other documents and supporting information. And so the DDA can authorize overnight supports under personal supports when a person does not have a behavior plan or nursing care plan in place. So it's really important to work with your team through that team process to have those discussions for what is needed. But personal supports, overnight supports is available. And then I would say, in addition to that, overnight supports are also available in our supported living services, which is also available under self-direction, in addition to overnight supports in our other residential models that are under our traditional side.
And then Rhonda, can respite be overnight?
Absolutely. Respite can be provided in 3 different ways. Camp is one way, and that can be overnight. We have daily respite, which is provided in one of our licensed DDA provider homes, and that's overnight. In addition, people can utilize respite. They can have other family members, they could have a neighbor or someone else provide that service, and that service would be billed on a 15-minute increment and can also be provided overnight.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, Christy, where can you find all of the cool forms and stuff that you created and went over today?
That's great. So they are available as a handout today in today's webinar, and they'll also be available on the self-directed services forms page that is linked in our webinar today.
Great. And if you need help accessing the handouts from today, you can always email Donna Will, who can support you in getting you a copy of those. Christy, is the team support broker, CCS, responsible to send the budget sheet over to the FMCS?
Right, so it really is up to that FMCS and their process. So it can be uploaded into LTSS where the FMCS has access to it. They may also ask for them to be submitted by the team.
Right. Okay. So for the day-to-day administrator, is the IFD, is the individually family directed goods and services form the only place that that can be mentioned, or can it be mentioned in the PCP? Or
Oh,
can it?
that's a good question. So it actually is the only service that shouldn't be requested in that goods and service form. So day-to-day administrator should be included either in the annual or revised plan process. So it would need to be included on the budget sheet.
Great.
Mhm.
All right. And one more time, another question, are budget modifications no longer reviewed by the DDA?
They would not be reviewed by the DDA unless the FMCS denies the request.
Okay. All right. Let's see, those are LTSS questions. We added those. Let's see. We answered the budget sheet. I answered that. Oh, Christy, can you explain the term cost savings?
I sure can. That is a good question. So once a person is when their person is planning for their person-centered plan and they've listed the supports that they need, they would do that in the detailed service authorization in LTSS. And what that does is it essentially generates a budget amount. That is what we call the budget allocation. So the amount the total budget amount that the person can use to self-direct their services. The team then takes that budget allocation and budgets it. So they might budget for their employees and their support broker, all of that in their budget sheet. Cost savings would be any amount that is not used from that total budget allocation. So it could be that you planned to pay someone $30 an hour, but when you interviewed someone and found someone that matched, it made more sense to pay them less. So you might have cost savings because you budgeted for 30 and you're paying them $28 an hour. Cost savings could also be unallocated funds, so funding that you just didn't include in your budget sheet to start with.
Great.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. A little change in direction here, and we mentioned this last Friday, but are SIPs required for self-directed services come July 1?
They are not required. They can be used as a tool, but we believe that in self-direction, especially, better tools for what the SIP does would be job descriptions for those employees and evaluation plans for those employees. So tools that make sure that your employees know what your goals are and what their expectations are to help you meet those goals.
Great. And for those that may wonder what the SIP is, it's the Service Implementation Plan. All right, let's go down to some more questions. Let's see here. There's a lot of support broker questions and day-to-day administrator questions. And one thing that we're working on is to develop a chart that kind of outlines the role of support broker, the role of day-to-day administrator, the role of CCS, who can play those roles or who can fulfill those roles, and what that really looks like. And so I want to take back the questions regarding those so that we can take a look at them and we can make sure that we give one guidance all at once related to the workings and the collaboration of those roles to best support people. So Rhonda, there was a clarification on your CPR training. So starting July 1st, people have to receive in-person CPR training, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of questions about first aid CPR, and I would encourage many of you to go back and take a look at the webinar and some of the guidance that's been issued on the wind down of Appendix K. Starting July 1st, people have to have in-person CPR first aid. If they currently have a virtual CPR first aid class, that is fine. They can continue to have that. They're qualified until it expires, and then it would need to be in person again. All right, let's see here. We're getting towards the end. Rhonda, there's a couple of questions about what is LTSS?
That's a really good question. When we refer to LTSS, we're talking about the state's IT system known as Long-Term Services and Supports, or LTSS for short, Maryland. And it is the IT system that the DDA programs, along with other Department of Health, home and community-based programs, has eligibility in it, person-centered plans in it. And for the DDA, we also have our case management activities noted in it, in addition to our service authorization for providers. There is a provider portal side for providers to bill. And then there is a new to DDA, a participant portal, the My LTSS that we were talking about a little bit earlier. So basically it's an IT system, an information technology software system that we put all this information and can access for different purposes.
Okay. Christy, does the $5,000 limit for individually family directed goods and services relate to the day-to-day administrator?
Okay, so this is a good question. So I want to just clarify that it's not a limit, but a requirement of a review by the DDA. So if someone were going to pay their day-to-day administrator more than $5,000 for the year, then that would need to be reviewed by the DDA. Yes.
Okay. Rhonda, is there a process in place or a plan in place to make sure that providers will have access to LTSS at the person's discretion?
Yeah, absolutely. The participant can, at their own discretion, provide access to the providers that they use. And when we talk about providers in this sense, we're talking about DDA providers. Again, participants can also provide access to other team members as representatives for themselves. It could be their support broker, family members, and others. So they'll have that opportunity to do that. Please note that when you provide access, people will be able to see your entire PCP and all your information. So you want to really think about that and consider, who you want to provide access to and that information. They can always get copies of information provided by your CCS or others, but once you provide access, they're going to be able to see and view a lot of your information. So you want to be very thoughtful about those decisions.
Great. If, Christy, there's still some confusion on when the individually family directed goods and services form is going to be used, which we will cover in guidance. But if individually family directed goods and services is clearly written in the plan, is the form still needed?
It would still be needed, yes, because we are, as a DDA, we're going to be taking that data to really see the great ways that people are using goods and services, and it also has a workflow that ensures that that information gets directly to the FMCS and regional office quickly. So yes.
Great. Rhonda, is an assessment still needed for assistive technology, and what is the cost threshold for an assessment?
What a great question. Yes, we do have a cost threshold for an assistive technology assessment. With the waiver renewal, it increased from $1,000 up to $2,500. Please note that if you're looking for technology that's below that threshold for the required assessment, you can still request an assessment if you'd like one done to be very specific and individualized for the person to make sure that the technology will meet their needs and assess other options that may be considered.
Great. All right. Just looking here. So Christy, there seems to be a little confusion on the budget mod versus the individually family directed goods and services form. So let's clarify again. Do budget modifications need to be approved by the DDA?
Budget modifications would only be reviewed by the DDA if the FMCS denies it, if they believe that the modification does not meet program standards. This is very similar to our current process with the budget form. When it's submitted, it gets submitted to the FMCS. And if the FMCS feels like the budget sheet does not meet program standards, then the DDA might review. So it's sort of that same process that the team, including the FMCS, would be ensuring program standards are met for Streamline.
All right, thank you. And then when would the region review the individually family directed goods and services form?
Yep, the region would only review requests for a purchase of $5,000 or more.
Okay. And again, there was a lot of questions on what can individually family directed goods and services be used for. We're going to be, again, creating some guidance and doing a webinar on that, and it will go into a lot more detail specifically about individually directed goods and services. And I've specifically noted all of the questions regarding the various requests. Again, some of these are going to be individualized requests that teams are going to have a conversation about in the context of the person and in the context of what is approved or not approved, which again, we will review in further guidance, printed guidance, and in a webinar. But we're going to take down all of these questions to make sure that we cover it. All right, let's see if I just didn't miss anything. And Christy, just as a reminder, where can people find the forms that you're shared today?
They will be on our DDA website under self-directed forms, and they're also available as handouts in our webinar.
Awesome. And when will there be a registration link sent out about the future webinars regarding individually family-directed goods and services and support brokers?
So that would be in the DDA connection next Thursday. So by the 25th, this Thursday, the 25th.
And what if this Thursday is a
This
tear
Thursday.
down version, so it's next
Oh.
Thursday.
The first, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the calendar incorrectly. The 1st of June.
Good.
Mhm.
And what if I don't immediately receive and review the DDA connection? Can I go online and also see past issues of the DDA connection?
You can. That's all. They're all available on our website.
Okay.
Mhm.
And Donna, if people need the handouts from today's meeting and they can't get them from the handout section, who should they reach out to obtain them?
I can send them out. I'm donna.will@maryland.gov.
All right, can you type that into the chat so people have it?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I think, first off, I just want to thank you. There were over 100 and some questions, and many of them were questions that we want to, that we answered, and then some were questions specific to support broker and individually directed goods and services that we want to take back, take a look at, and make sure that we include in guidance. Remember, this was an initial webinar to let you know that these things are coming. There are additional questions, and again, we're going to have guidance on those and another webinar on those so that you can get more information and that we are specifically focused on either individually directed goods and services or the support broker changes. If we didn't get to your question, there will be an FAQ that is completed after this. And we will also make sure that some of the questions that came in are answered similar to how we did today in future webinars. So are there any new questions that people would like to add? There's some questions on how long do FMCSs have to do this or that task. And that's something I want to bring back to our team to have a conversation about. I don't want to give anyone incorrect information. So we'll take that back to our team and we'll make sure that we get back to everybody at the next webinar about the timeframes associated with FMCSs, the timeframes associated with the regional offices, just so that everyone is level set on that. And it's in one place to review all of that. If you guys, another question just came through that if you have questions that aren't answered in the FAQ, who's the best person to contact? So it really depends on what your question is. If your question is based upon the plan or the person or the services that the person needs, I would reach out to your CCS. If there's questions that the team has, I would reach out to the regional office self-directed lead. If there's additional questions on a policy or a guidance perspective, then I would reach out to Christy, who is our self-directed coordinator for the state. And for those of you that are asking for the dates of the trainings, they're on the slides, and we will be sending out a registration link in the DDA connection. And for the FMCS specific questions, again, I will bring those back to the team and we will discuss the FMCS specific questions. When will the individually family directed goods and services form be available? It's available now and it's on the website. Christy, can you put your contact information in the chat box so people have that?
Can.
Great, thank you. There was a request that DDA should provide timeframes for when things need to be approved. There are timeframes. They are documented in our PCP guidance that was actually just updated and is on our PCP web page. But we will also reflect those timeframes in the guidance related to the individually family directed goods and services, as well as the recorded webinar that will be released regarding the budget modification process. If you're having a difficult time downloading the budget and the modification spreadsheet, please reach out to Christy. She can help you with that. All right, so there was a lot of information today, a ton of it. It's gonna take everybody a while to kind of filter through it, think about your questions. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate then to submit to us. We wanted to do this in chunks, kind of a broad overview that we did today. Then we want to then again do an individually family directed goods and services webinar based on the guidance. Then we wanted to do a webinar based upon the support broker expanded role so that people have time to retain the information and make sure that they fully feel prepared and that they have the information they need. So I hope that you're all able to join us for future webinars. We'll again send out the invites to those links, and we will make sure that we have all of that information available to you. Christy, did you want to share any additional information?
I do have a note because I'm seeing a question about this. The good and service form is not currently available on our website, but it will be available on June 19th on the date of our webinar regarding goods and services.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that is about all the questions. Oh, somebody mentioned a Friday webinar. Yes, last Friday there was a webinar facilitated by Rhonda and her team. Rhonda, how do people get access to the slide deck from the webinar that you hosted last Friday?
Yeah, great question. We are adding that to the website. It'll go under the webinar tab, and we'll put information in the next DDA Connections, next week's DDA Connections to be able to grab that quickly.
Perfect. Robert, did you have anything else to add? I know you had helped answer a couple of questions. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Great. No, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Nick. Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'm sure we will talk very soon. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.